They don't give you a seat at the table. Bring a folding chair. Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman elected to Congress, all the way back in 1968. While the topics and times are vastly different than they were 50 years ago, the indisputable value of having a seat at the table in Washington and in Ottawa, that's no different today. None. As a result, ALPA has a greater responsibilities to our members now more than ever to sit beside regulators, lawmakers who influence the industry. As decision makers determine the future of our industry and our profession, it's incumbent on us to make sure our views are heard in every single debate. As the saying goes, and you've heard it before, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And the consequences of absence at any event could be high. Thanks to the expertise offered by ALPA pilots, including each and every one of you in this room, our union is almost without exception consulted and included in discussions on aviation matters. Our reputation and real-world experience are, simply put, beyond reproach when it comes to labor relations, safety, security, pilot assistance, and jump seat. Beyond reproach. It's this seat at the table that gives us power and sets us apart on Capitol Hill and up on Parliament Hill, and yes, at the bargaining table. One testament to ALPA's relationship is our keynote speaker today. We're welcoming to the executive board Acting FAA Administrator Dan Elwell, and we're honored that he will join us here today. As I'm certain he will discuss, the FAA is holding an aviation workforce symposium later this week. ALPA's on the agenda, as you would expect, and we're eager to share our past history and future plans to keep the piloting pipeline strong and, very importantly, our skies safe at the same time. After all, every one of us ALPA members in the room made a decision, conscious decision to become an airline pilot, and no one understands better what it takes to inspire new talent to join our ranks. ALPA's, we're continuously and constantly finding new ways to reach the new generation of union leaders and aviators and deliver on the members' goal for the future of our profession. So Bill's going to have much more in the way of updates on this issue, and we'll also have some details on the new ALPA mobile app coming out soon, which helps in this area. We've all read the reports of people stating along these lines that there's not going to be enough airline pilots. Some have even offered that reducing crew complement on our flight decks is a solution to that problem. The issue of crew complement has been part of ALPA's history all the way back to the beginning. Safety has always been at the heart of the discussion, though. ALPA's first position on crew complement goes all the way back to 1932, when ALPA founder Captain Dave Benke urged airlines that didn't use co-pilots, yes, did not have co-pilots, to do so, quote, in the interest of public safety, in the interest of public safety. And it's that interest in public safety that's been part and parcel of our union's work ever since. Airline pilots understand, really like no one else, the demands of flying in complex and complicated airspace, constantly changing. We know the importance, the absolute requirement of having two pilots in the cockpit to ensure the safety of our cargo and our passengers. It's for these reasons that ALPA is helping lead more than 100,000 airline pilots from across the United States in joining forces to fight a reckless attempt to take pilots out of the cockpit. This blatant attack on aviation safety came in the form of two very dangerous provisions inserted into the House FAA reauthorization bill. This measure to push for single-piloted or computer-piloted cargo operations was never, I want to emphasize that, never publicly debated. In shorthand, it was a backroom deal. Section 744 and Section 703 authorize a new research and development program in support of single pilot, all cargo operations using remote piloting or computer piloting technology. And to be clear, we recognize this effort in cargo operations is a first step down a path to pilotless aircraft in other operations. But the path is heading in a direction that we know the American public does not want to go. In fact, an ALPA-commissioned public opinion poll released in July clearly shows that Americans are not at all comfortable with the idea of being a passenger on an airliner that is completely pilotless. In fact, more than 80%, and that's a huge number in public opinion polls, of the respondents said that they are not ready for pilotless airplanes. They want no part of it. None. And let's be clear, and this one's an important one, that this effort is a corporate giveaway. Taxpayers should ask, why are they being asked or forced to pay for an anti-public safety program? And that's exactly what this bill does. Funds it with taxpayer money. As I've mentioned, unions representing pilots at 50 airlines have formed a strong alliance to voice our flat-out rejection of this irresponsible handout, which so clearly undermines the interest of public safety, in Benke's words. I've asked Captain Bill Secor from FedEx Express. Bill, are you in the room? And if you are, please stand. I guess Bill's not in with us today. To lead ALPA's efforts with this alliance. The goal? Simple. The language must be stricken from the FAA reauthorization. And ALPA's not going to spare any effort to make that happen. With Captain Secor's leadership and the full involvement of this executive board and our members, I am very confident we will succeed. With the serious exception of this language, I want to emphasize the recently passed House FAA reauthorization does contain important safety progress for both passenger and all cargo operations. Top of the list is that this reauthorization reflects 4 hard years of work by ALPA to advance our members' interests in maintaining the FAA's current minimum first officer qualification, training, and experience requirements. For nearly a year, Trained for Life. The Train for Life campaign has communicated the value and importance of experience and training to the flying and shipping public as the legislators and policymakers in Washington, D.C. We're constantly working to make the strongest connection with the right audiences to show how pilot experience and training saves lives. For example, our social media ads are currently targeting Washington, D.C., and we have airport dioramas up in Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, and Seattle. So please look for those as you're transiting those airports. Look, I know everyone in this room knows this. ALPA is eager to continue to work with Congress, the Department of Transportation, the FAA, and really all stakeholders to ensure that there's a strong pilot supply pipeline in the United States. But we've got to make sure that it has no adverse impact on safety, and we're never going to take our eye off that ball. As part of this effort, ALPA's just released a new position paper that lays out our policy solutions for how the U.S. airline industry can attract new pilots and serve small and rural communities. We're also creating a Canadian Train for Life page on our website as a positive step in addressing the real pilot supply issues being faced up in Canada. So let me go back to the FAA reauthorization for just a moment. And let me emphasize that, again, with the major exception of this Section 744703 language, the House reauthorization does contain important ALPA-supported safety progress for both passengers and all cargo operations. For example, it improves the safe transport of lithium batteries. It supports pilot assistance programs. It enhances ASAP programs with automatic acceptance. It includes language requiring secondary cockpit barriers on new passenger airliners. In addition, the bill makes certain that U.S. foreign air carrier permits are in the public interest, a test a really common sense test that should block airlines with flag of convenience business models from getting into the United States in the future. The FAA reauthorization is currently in the Senate, and our pilot volunteers and our staff in government affairs are concentrating without distraction on getting a long-term bill with ALPA's priorities for passenger and cargo safety done by the end of the year. As important as the FAA reauthorization is to our mission, ALPA makes certain to have a seat at the table whenever aviation is involved, period. So we continue to deliver on our members' goals in all 4 of our air safety organization disciplines. So Joe, he'll have more in his remarks, but let me give you just a few examples of our recent success. So thanks to our seat at the table and our leadership, this is amazing. The known crew member program has conducted more than 100 million, I didn't misspeak, 100 million airline pilot and flight attendant screenings since inception in 2011. Hey, look, never forget, we did that. That was ALPA that conceived of and put this program in place. That's our success, 100 million screenings. Also, in testimony before the House Aviation Subcommittee, ALPA urged congressional leaders to ensure that commercial space operations are safely integrated into the national airspace. That's where our members work, the national airspace. We were the only member of the airline community invited to speak at that meeting, that hearing before the Senate, or the House, excuse me. In addition to ensuring we had a seat at the table for formal comments, ALPA Canada President Captain Dan Adamus not only had a seat at the table, he had a position at the news conference podium when Canadian Transport Minister Marc Garneau announced an interim order banning more powerful lasers in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, as well as within 10 kilometers of all airports. Great achievement. And here's a quick update on our efforts regarding our ME3 issues. Our focus is now shifted, but only slightly, and the shift is towards ensuring compliance. While the commitments received by the U.S. from the government of both the UAE and Qatar regarding transparency and fair competition, they're clearly encouraging, we're now looking for those countries to take some action to back up the words they put on that piece of paper. Okay, so let's turn to collective bargaining and our union's seat at the table. And the fact that our MEC's seat at the table have negotiated for their members and have ratified strong new agreements at ATI, Endeavor, Hawaiian, Spirit, and they're not here today, but as well as the first ever collective bargaining agreement for the JetBlue pilots. So we currently have 9 pilot groups in negotiations, with many others working towards contract improvements outside of the formal process. I'd like you to pay close attention to each of the Master Chairman updates for all the pilot groups that are in negotiations as we go around for our property updates. I want to be clear about this. Every single ALPA pilot group is important when they're in negotiations and even when they're out of negotiations, and will always receive the full weight of ALPA's resources when in negotiations. But today I'm just going to highlight two groups in particular, and for very specific reasons. I'm going to start with Frontier. Because quite honestly, this is the first test at Frontier of the new National Mediation Board. And I'm going to be blunt, it is not going well with this National Mediation Board. It is not going well. On September 22, the Frontier pilots will have the dubious honor of having reached the 2-year anniversary of filing for mediation. Backed by a $2 million MCF grant approved by this body, the Frontier pilots have pursued every possible path to a fair contract. Informational picketing, a request for a proffer to the NMB, a lawsuit citing a pattern of bad faith conduct by the airline management, and a mobile strike center which is parked right outside this building. Despite these inexcusable delays, the NMB has finally done something they should have done months ago, and they've responded with new mediation dates that are now set for October, right after the BOD, at the headquarters in Washington for the NMB. I know, Mike, Tracy, your team, they're going to be ready. The pilots will be ready, and so will this union to support the pilots as they go back to the table with their management. The next one I want to talk about, WestJet. They always find a way to help us. On the day ALPA filed cards to represent the WestJet pilots, the day we filed them, management announced the creation of Swoop, which is an ultra-low-cost model, non-union airline that would use aircraft transferred out of the main line into that fleet. Talk about a way to make sure we get ALPA votes. It was like handed to us. Against this backdrop, the pilot negotiators made significant progress in working with management to achieve the pilot group's overall contract goals. However, faced with an impending strike/lockout under the Canadian Labor Code's timeline, for those in the U.S., is much more compressed than what we have under the Railway Labor Act, the pilot leaders made a calculated decision to enter into a Meade-ARB agreement with their management. First issue up, the arbitrator was to address who would fly at Swoop and if ALPA would represent them. I think everyone in the room knows, big win, we prevailed. Rob, I know this has been a hard-fought battle, but you won it, at least in the first phase, and you prevented a non-unionized alter ego carrier from existing under your carrier's holding company structure. Not a small task. The final Meade-ARB session occurred this past weekend, and unfortunately, the parties could not reach final agreement. You'll hear from Rob about how they'll conclude the final elements of the contract when he gives his property update later today. One more note before I wrap up here. The PAC competition's heating up. It's for the 100% campaign within our MECs, the Key Men's Society, the J.J. O'Donnell Awards. The PAC Steering Committee has supported a subcommittee to oversee the J.J. O'Donnell selection process. And I want to be clear, I know you do this with me, but I make giving to the PAC a personal priority. I do. And I know many of you do as well. I always appreciate this board's commitment to the PAC, but I feel especially grateful during BOD years because it's our chance to set the example for our members. I want to thank each of you who's participating period, but especially those participating at the Benke Circle and President Circle levels. Your leadership sets the tone for MEC members, which sets the tone for our line pilots. Our PAC is essential. It's enabling our work in Washington, D.C., and our victories there would simply not be possible without it and without your dedication to it. Of her legacy, Congressman Chisholm said, "I want to be remembered as a woman who dared to be a catalyst for change." Well, I know this of everyone in this room. All the ALPA leaders and members have always been catalysts for change. In bargaining better contracts, advancing safety, security of our industry, and ensuring that this profession has a bright future. ALPA pilots know we can only drive change if we have a seat at the table. We've got to have a seat at the table. And I, for one, am willing to bring a folding chair to get one. Thanks very much.